All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Ontario Environmental Product Declaration Initiative webinar. This is a very, very hot topic in the industry, and we're definitely happy to bring you this today. It's some very information that will be implemented by consultants, owners, architects, and numerous other individuals. So we definitely want to make sure everybody gets this information as soon as possible. In terms of it being an Ontario webinar, we were approached by the other associations across the country. So technically it is a provincial environmental product declaration initiative webinar. Each association will be doing something very similar. So make sure you reach out to your local association engineers or representatives, and they'll fill you in on what's happening exactly on their end. We'll just do some housekeeping. So my name's Alan Carey. I'm the Director of Technical Services at Concrete Ontario. Joining me today, we have Bart Canters, who's the President of Concrete Ontario. And then we also have James Salazar, who's a Sustainability Consultant from Athena. So good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Alan.
Thank you.
Now, in terms of who do you contact if you do have any questions, so not myself, I'm just a facilitator. I'm going to be just going over some basic things, but all the difficult questions and any major concerns with this initiative, just make sure you contact Bart or James.
Alan, just to let you know, we've moved your performance review up to this afternoon, so 1 o'clock, just to let you know.
Outstanding. So I will be doing a lot more today then. In terms of housekeeping, it will be approximately a 45-minute webinar. We will have questions and answers at the end. All participants are currently muted, and you will remain that way for the whole webinar. If you do have a question, make sure you use the GoToWebinar questions pane on the right side of your screen, and you can type in your question. As mentioned, we'll address most of the questions at the end. Unless we see something very pressing, then we'll address it right away. We've had numerous people ask about, will this webinar be recorded? It currently is being recorded and will be posted on our Concrete Ontario website with a PDF copy of the presentation. And I do have to apologize for the scheduling time of this webinar, especially to the West Coast participants, including James, who had to get up pretty early. So again, our apologies, but the webinar will be available on our website, and there will be a follow-up email sent tomorrow morning through GoToWebinar, giving you all the information so you can access that. The agenda for today, basically we're going to start out with what are EPDs and what's this topic that everybody's talking about in our industry. Where's the industry heading with EPDs? Why should ready-mix producers participate in the provincial EPD initiative? What's the timeline of this initiative, and what's the updated report going to look like? There will be a report that we're putting together, and then we'll have Athena address, what exactly is required in terms of inputs for members. They are developing a Type 3 EPD calculator as well, so we'll kick it over to James to provide an overview on everything what's required. Before we do get into any of the, I guess, technical side of it, I want to start off by just talk about EPDs. What is an EPD? So an EPD is an environmental product declaration. It's a communication document that quantifies environmental impact data for manufacturing a product. So basically, it's just the nutrition label like you would see on this bar, for example, Delicious Lara bar. And it talks about, the impact that a certain mix design or a concrete has on the environment in terms of kgs of CO2 per cubic meter. And what's that? And that's basically called a global warming potential, or a GWP. So similar to a nutrition label of any other product, where you're looking at calories, fats, carbohydrates, sugars, this is what consultants and architects are worried about. What is the actual impact of that concrete on the environment? And depending on the cement content and the mix design, it can have either a substantial impact, or it can be classified as low carbon concrete, which is where we're trying to get to. The resources we currently have available is the Canadian Ready Mix Concrete Association Industry-Wide EPD report. Unfortunately, this report expires on January 6, 2022, so in a couple of months. And it has already been 5 years since this report has been released. There was not a lot of uptake in the first few years, but now, again, like I mentioned, it is the hottest topic in the industry, and we want to put the effort in to update this report and make sure that consultants, architects, owners have this information available from our industry. The aim with these reports is to achieve low carbon concrete and basically turn structures into net zero. Everybody's talking about it. This is just our contribution from the industry. So what does this report actually have? It has 125 mixed designs that were gathered across the country. Information was gathered and compiled, and we picked 125 mixes to showcase what is their impact on the environment. So you can see, for example, mix number 1, 25 GU mix with air, 0 to 14% fly ash or slag, and the impact is 327.33 kgs of CO2 per cubic meter. Now, these numbers, do they actually make a lot of sense? We're not sure at this point. That's why we are providing a provincial or regional update to the reports so we can get a better understanding of where we stand as an industry. Now, what are the main issues in terms of this report? First of all, it's a national average. So we compiled all this information from all the different associations, different ready mix producers across the country, submitted information, and then we created these values. And as you can imagine, inputs were averaged and then averaged again and averaged again. And at that point, the data does pretty much become irrelevant. Consultants and architects have already voiced their concern for this report, and they want to see regional averages, again, provincial averages, or even plant-specific values, and that's where the industry is heading. They want to be able to identify a certain plant in a province and be able to say this mixed design from that plant has this impact on the environment. Now, where's the industry heading, and why is this all important? Why should you participate? I'm going to kick it over to Bart to provide an update on what the federal government's doing.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. And again, the CRMCA has been working in partnership with the Cement Association of Canada on this topic for 3 to 5 years now. Interest is really picking up in the last 2. And again, we want to thank the CAC and all their efforts. It's really a combination of the cement and concrete industries working together here. So jumping ahead, as Alan was saying before, what are people interested in? Sorry, Alan, I can't advance it. You should hit the button there.
There you go.
Okay, so what are people interested in? They're interested in the carbon intensity of the ready-mix concrete that we're producing. So from a ready-mix producer standpoint, we've got complete control over the raw materials that we use and the manufacturing processes that we're following. So the purpose of this webinar today is to help explain to people how we're going to collect that information regarding the manufacturing side and the inputs that we need at the concrete plant level. We work in partnership with our raw material suppliers, so the cement companies, the aggregate producers, and the admixture companies when it comes to optimizing mix designs and looking at what the total embodied carbon content is. But when it comes to owners, they want to know the whole picture. So again, we've got direct control over extraction and manufacturing. We also have a very good handle in the ready-mix industry on transportation because we know how much diesel fuel we're using or whatever fuel source you have for your trucks to get the material out to the job site. The last component is construction, and that's where in the ready-mix industry, we hand it off to the contractor, and the contractor has to place it, finish it, cure it, protect it. So they have some inputs there as well too. But the whole idea here is we need to quantify and have accurate data. That old saying, the only way you can improve something is if you start measuring it. So really what the industry is asking us to do is to start measuring it. So stepping back quickly, the last slide I have here, we've been working in partnership with the National Research Council. Both the CAC and CRMCA sit on a number of committees with the NRC looking at life cycle cost assessment as it relates to buildings and how we can provide more accurate information. So we're very pleased to see that the NRC is partnering with us and providing direct funding to support this initiative. As Alan said, we're doing regional averages. So we're going to have 7 regional averages this time around rather than 1 national average. We're going to have a calculator that's going to allow people to do their own quick and dirty calculations, because what you're going to see is that as we go forward, people are going to be asking you not just for optimization for strength, not just for optimization on permeability or shrinkage reduction, but carbon reduction is going to become one of the key areas. So we have to have good tools that we can use to do that. And then you're going to see, as Alan's going to talk about in a little bit, there's going to be a push to roll this into specifications. So where we sit right now, we're expecting in the next month that the federal government is going to come out with their green procurement strategy for concrete. They've been consulting with us for 2 years on this. They're looking at specifying Portland limestone cement usage because of its 10% reduction in CO2. They're looking at specifying minimum levels of SCM replacement. So again, they're recognizing the fact that we need to work with the contractors and address workability and site conditions and temperature out on the job site, but we have to have a goal of trying to reduce the carbon content in the mix. They're going to allow industry average EPDs to start off with, and that's what this project is all about. But then they're looking at, in the next 2 years, moving to facility-specific EPDs. So EPDs that are specific to the actual mixes that you supplied out to the job site. And again, it all comes back to you have to quantify, you have to measure your carbon intensity if you want to reduce it. So that's really what this is all about. And I'll hand it back to you, Alan.
Thanks, Bart. And we were kind of hoping that the NRC would be the leader when it came to this space and this initiative. But unfortunately, here in Ontario, we do have a lot of keen architects and engineers that have taken the CRMCA report and they've started running with it. We were not consulted on some of these requirements, but as you can see on your screen, this is a project in Scarborough, so in the GTA here in Toronto. It's called the Northeast Scarborough Community Recreation Center. And basically what they've done is they've taken all the elements for that specific building and they've attached GWP numbers to it. So if you look at footings, you have a 30 MPa at 56 days, and your GWP has to be 256 or less. For your slab on grade, you have a 25 MPa concrete, and your GWP requirement is 234 kgs of CO2 per meter cubed. Oh, let me go back. So what are some concerns when it comes to the specifications? One, the architects and engineers aren't really even identifying what's the unit. They're not even sure what the unit of GWP is supposed to be. So they didn't indicate that in this specification. And the other concerns are, these are absolute values. So for example, your footing, or sorry, your slab on grade, 25 MPa, has to be 234 kgs of CO2 per cubic meter, and it doesn't matter what time of year it is. If it's wintertime, are you able to meet that? Potentially. In the summertime, it might be a lot easier. But what's not factored in, and when we had this discussion with them last week, was what happens if there's a delay to the project? What happens if the season changes, the weather changes? Concrete is an evolving material as you bring it to site. One truckload could have certain proportions. The next truck can be changed at the plant to reflect what's going on site. So these absolute values don't make sense. And we were very curious where they actually got these numbers from, because the CRMCA report is the only resource we currently have. Now, from an industry aspect, we want to understand, what are these numbers and do they actually make sense? And that's where the Ontario Industry Average or your regional industry average will shed a lot more light on what is making sense. And then looking at this specification in more detail, so if we analyze the 25 MPa slab on grade mix, which has a GWP of 234, it is based on the CRMCA report. So now you as a producer need to go back to the CRMCA report and you need to identify what mixes would actually meet that requirement. So mixed 11, for example, is 25 MPa with GUL without air and 30 to 40% fly ash. You would be able to meet that 234 GWP number with 227. Is it reasonable to use 30 to 40% fly ash on this specific mix design? I think the ready mix producers would have a better idea, but overall, you can change that mix design once you actually start using it. If you want to accelerate the mix, if you want to do anything else, you may be above that GWP. So again, another flaw to the specification. Some other options, you could use mix number 15, 25 MPa with GUL without air, with 25 to 34% slag. Again, you'd be very close to that value, but again, nothing can change. That's the mix design you would have to use unless you can unless you can change your mix proportions and use other ways to get this reduction in GWP. So we have been discussing this with the architects and engineers, and we want to make sure that we are sitting at the table, like Bart mentioned, with the NRC, and that we will be able to have some kind of input before these specifications are released.
Yeah, there's two things that jump out at me when we look at this. One is the fact that we do have members that have produced facility-specific EPDs, not just in Ontario. BC, Ontario, Alberta all have producers that have produced facility-specific EPDs. So again, there's no question that we're moving this way. I guess it just raises the question too, if we're going to get down to project-specific, this is the reason why having regional data becomes a lot more critical. Again, if we're doing an average across the whole country, by definition, half of the country is higher than the average. So again, if we're going to get down to detailed specification requirements on projects, we need to have a little more accurate data, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Bart. And in terms of picking the updated mix design, so the previous reported 125 different variations of mixes. In Ontario, this is kind of what we're targeting right now. We may make some minor changes to this before we submit it to Athena, but we're basically looking at GU and GUL variations of these 18 mix designs. We're looking at 5 SEM replacement levels. In Ontario, we primarily use slag. So we were looking at potentially targeting these ranges. They're still being finalized. We're initially looking at 4 replacement levels, but our members have indicated that there are lots of concretes, especially downtown Toronto, where the slag percentages used are much higher, 50%, 60%. So that's something they would like to see in this updated report. And then also, for example, the previous report started at 25 MPa. We identified here in Ontario that there are a lot of residential walls that are 20 MPa with air, 15 MPa with air, so we do need to include that. A major mix that was left off last time is a 32 MPa mix, which is your sidewalk mix. There's massive volumes there. So this is kind of what we settled on so far, and we're going to be working with Athena to now get the data for the updated report. So that's basically it from my end. Now I can turn it over to James to provide an update on what Athena's doing and what Athena requires from ready-mix producers.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, so thanks for that. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Hold on. Make it bigger here. Too many control panels going on here. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, well, no, well, thanks for that. And I do have a few slides, but I do want to make sure that we get to the data collection, because I think that's the most important part. And I want to leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, that sort of thing. Feel free. Oh, 1 second. I've gone away from my slides.
Yeah, we can see your slides, James.
Yeah, but I can't.
Oh, well, that makes it a little harder.
I don't know how I managed to do that. I may have to stop a share screen and start again. Oh, it's like looking in the mirror. Okay, here we go. Yeah, sorry. So hopefully everybody can see my slide deck again. But yeah, I do want to go through a few just quick slides to kick off what we're doing, but yeah, to leave some time at the end, obviously, to go through our survey, and I think that's the most important part. So yeah, if I'm moving through these, I think we will provide the slide deck at the end. So I wanted to leave a few of these in there so you have a little bit of background if you actually get the slides. A quick agenda. I think These gentlemen already covered it, but I want to talk a little bit about the project at hand, what it is we're doing exactly, and obviously why you should participate. I think they also did a great job at covering that. Things seem to be moving towards requiring EPDs at various levels, so I think there's a pretty strong case there. And then timeline, and then again, what our expectations are data-wise and how you go about doing that and participating in the study. Really quick, for those of you that don't know us, hopefully a lot of you do. We're the Athena Institute, nonprofit based out of Ottawa. Been doing life cycle assessments since way before it was fashionable. We're coming up on 25 years next year. But really, in these last 5-7 years, doing lots in the EPD space, particularly in concrete and cement, working with PCA, CRMCA in the States, and obviously previous version of this study here in Canada, and also with some of you guys directly developing EPDs as well. So the updated industry EPDs, the goal is to have, basically to incorporate all of this regional data into a single, what we call an LCA background report. That report documents all the model and everything we've done. That gets reviewed and verified at the same time as the EPDs. But the key point here is that we're moving now towards regional EPDs. So each province plus Atlantic Canada will have its own representative data and results. So let's say representative of SCM availability, things like that. And then the end goal here is to have all of this built into an EPD calculator so that, those of you that participate at the end can then basically enroll very seamlessly into developing your own EPDs. Because as Bart mentioned there's new legislation and things like that, or say new initiatives at the federal government to require plant-specific EPDs. So I think that's important. Here's the breakdown of the EPDs we're going to produce. We're going to produce 7 new EPDs this go round. I think that'll be a big improvement. It seems to be more towards what the architect engineering community and also the NRC at the federal level are requesting from us. CRMCA and particularly Concrete Ontario and Bart and his team are really doing a lot to spearhead this project. There are regional technical committees through your provincial level associations that are right now working with us to develop plant directories to find out who's going to participate, but also to develop the representative mixes. So if you have input on that, for sure be in touch with your provincial level representative. Another player in this is the EPD program operator. All of these EPDs will be third-party verified and stamped. I believe last time we used NSF, but there's also others as well. And obviously, we're actually conducting the LCA, producing the EPDs for all the different provincial level averages. The scope of the EPD, I won't dwell on this, is cradle to gate. It does include, to a degree, some transport or A4, what we call the delivery to the site, but only to the degree that we're using, let's say, transit mixing trucks and are basically partitioning out the production energy, mixing energy from, let's say, the transportation, because the scope of these is we call it cradle to gate. Again, same thing. Why participate? I think this is the important thing. In order to, first of all, in order to claim the EPD, one must be listed in the plant directory. So it's really important that, let's say, if you're going to submit the industry EPD with a job, again, we're moving more towards plant specific, but it's not to say that the industry EPDs are not representative. They certainly are. But in order to do that, you have to make sure that you're on the plant directory, you're in our system, and totally enrolled. In order to benchmark, you're also needing to have participated in the EPD. So let's say if you want to produce a mix and make some estimation or claim that it's X% better than what the average would be, then you're going to want to have participated as well. But also, it's also really important, I think, for the industry as a whole to put out the most representative and most up-to-date data, because things seem to be trending more lower carbon over time, and having more up-to-date, more current information is always better. And last but not least is this idea of actually onboarding onto our system. Now, as you know, we produce EPDs on demand. And basically, we're set you up with an account and a login, and we have, based on your survey data, we can customize a calculator that's specific to your supply chain, your kind of really plant-specific information. And then what that does is it allows you to enter in the mixes and generate EPDs on demand. Now, that entire kind of onboarding process, because you would be filling out a survey for this and having it validated, that's a significant savings, because basically the industry is now, the association is basically paying for you to be onboarded onto our system. So when you get to the end of this, once you've completed a survey, you'll have the ability to access parts of the tool that are like this, where you're actually entering in a mix and producing these results, and then actually generating an EPD in real time. We're currently working with some of you guys right now on our current system, but we're really excited to be launching this new system here later this year. And this is really the survey part of it that I'm going to show you in a second is really a big part of that, getting the correct information into the tool. But yeah, you will be fully set up, and all you'll need to do, let's say at the end, is kind of opt in and be able to start generating EPDs. Timeline-wise, I have to say I think we're doing pretty well. Currently, we're in this first stage of developing the plant directories and coming up with the representative mixes that are going to be in the EPDs. That ends October 31, but I believe we're ahead of schedule on the plant directories. So this next step here of actually gathering the data, was scheduled to start October 31. We're probably going to move that up a little bit and go ahead and give access to the surveys. But yeah, you'll be hearing from us very shortly on that. Following the data collection, that does end December 31. We actually take those, develop the regional average, basically facility averages and supply chain averages, and complete the modeling into, let's say, through the winter and into the spring. And then the reports themselves will be Q2 of next year, so April 15 for draft reports, and having all those signed off and verified by May, which is good because the current EPD is expiring next year. So after that point, the last step there is this regionalized EPD calculator. I think we're well ahead of pace on that. Once the study is done, we'll be all set and ready to go to produce EPDs on demand. But the key takeaway here is December 31. That's the deadline for facility data. We're going to try and give you a couple extra weeks if possible on the front end, but we're hoping that 8-10 weeks is more than enough to pull the required information together. One thing I can say is, as you're getting into the surveys, we're really keen to get what we can out of you. And if you're getting hung up on things, we're inclined to take partial data as opposed to no data. So hopefully, let's say if there's a few things hanging going into December and your team's ducked off on holidays or something like that, we would just ask you to submit it as is, and we'll go from there. But we're really wrapping this up this calendar year. And finally, what are the requirements? I'm going to show you the survey itself in a second, but those of you who participated in 2016 should have a fairly good idea of what we're looking for. But this time around, the main difference being that we're moving towards web interface. So I'm going to go ahead and show that. Hopefully everybody can still see my screen. It should look like a login screen. So basically what's happening right now is at the provincial level, we're receiving the directories of all the facilities, and we will be identifying which companies and facilities we need to participate in order to get a representative sample. We're looking for a good cross-reference of the industry. We're aware that probably it skews a bit towards the larger, more integrated producers that more engaged in this, or let's say dealing in the larger markets where EPDs and low carbon concrete are already kind of arrived. But what will happen is once we finalize those directories, you'll get an email with credentials and then a link to this screen here. So you'll basically be provided with your login and password. And once you have that, you can go to our page and log in. This landing page here kind of gives you a bit of a status update, what you need to do. I'm going to jump forward to the second button here because this is basically your plant directory. So this is right now what we're working on. And then this becomes the basis for your you're managing your data for the different plants you're looking at. We have it set up where, you can have a centralized user that deals with a bunch of plants if you're inclined to do it that way. Or we have, let's say, individual contacts more at a mill level, and this list would obviously be shorter. But for those of you who are managing numerous facilities, we want to make it as easy as we can to have you be able to access everything in a single place and to see how it's going. This next step, there's two parts of the survey, and you'll see that kind of mentioned on here where we're looking for supplier information and also the actual facility survey. So let's go first towards the supplier information. That's probably the most new here, the new part of the survey. And I can say too that we've been receiving some feedback on beta version of the survey tool. We've got a lot of the comments kind of incorporated, but not yet pushed in this release. But this should be close enough to really give you an idea of how this is going to work. But just those of you who have provided feedback, just so you know that, yeah, we've incorporated that into the interface. But as software developers are inclined to do, they don't want you to demo the one they're working on. They want you to demo the last version. So that's what we're doing. So the way this works is you're going to go through and basically enter in all of your supplier information. Now, one of the things that we have changed is the way this works. You can enter in your facility here, but we've actually added another layer on suppliers to categorize it. So our categories being, let's say, cement and aggregates, admixtures, etc. Because right now it's a bit of an unwieldy list to kind of have to scroll through. But the gist of it is that you're going to go through and you're going to do two things. First of all, you're going to specify the actual cement supplier that you're purchasing from. The reason we're doing that is because there's so many new EPDs for cement products that are coming online that we want to make this as specific as possible and incorporate that data when available. So the first thing you do is to, let's say, select your cement supplier. So I'm going to really quick just add one. This one is, let's say, Picton, and I can do enter in my tonnage. This is going to be annual tonnage. That's just one of the kind of clarification notes we've added to the interface, that we're looking for annual volumes here. Supplier distance, this is a one-way distance. So let's say you're 60 kilometers from that facility, and you're purchasing 50,000 tons of GU, then I save that. And what that does now is it's added it to my supplier list. Now, we understand that you may have lots and lots of different suppliers. We definitely want to get as specific as we can on cement. But let's say for aggregates, if you're pulling off of several different pits, you have the option, you've got two options. You can basically provide them each one at a time within the tool, in which case you'd basically select a new crust coarse aggregate. Let's say this is going to be, a new supplier. I can enter in a tonnage and a distance that's specific to that supplier, and then basically add those each in. You can do that, let's say, for your highest volume sites that you're buying from. Another option that is perfectly acceptable would be to total that together over the course of a year and just give us basically a weighted average of the distances. That's how we've done it in the past. But we basically want to give you the option this time around, rather than calculating the weighted average on your end. If you'd like to basically add them in one at a time, then we'd be on the hook to do that. So that's what we're looking for on the supplier side, to go through and basically complete this list of the cement suppliers, your aggregate suppliers. Now, add mixtures. This is one update we have made to simplify it a little bit. Right now, we've got individual, basically, add mixtures. We understand you probably are buying most of your add mixtures from a single supplier. So we're going to streamline that somewhat, where it just has basically all add mixtures as an option. And then you can enter that in, just do it once. But the point is here that we're looking for the complete supplier information. And this is this has evolved from our plant-specific EPD process, because that, when we move more towards plant-specific, now we're talking very supply chain specific as much as possible, obviously on the cement with their EPDs, but really to try and incorporate as much facility-specific data. So that's where, that's basically a dual purpose for this supplier type screen. So if I go back now, I can see that I can kind of keep track of my suppliers on a single screen. I can see that I've got 7 added to Toronto Airport, and now I'm satisfied, and I want to move now to the surveys themselves. You can see here that I've already submitted one survey to the system, but let's go ahead and fill out a new one. So I'll select that same Toronto Airport facility. It takes you to the survey screen. I see, trying not to pay too close of attention to the comments to the end, but I do want to address these kind of as they pop up a little bit. I think we got the first one on the benefits of participating. But as far as access, I should be really clear about this, that I believe we have NDAs signed with the provincial level associations, and if not, that's will be completed here very shortly. But we're also, we enter into NDAs with the individual companies. If you'd like to have us fill out your NDA, that's fine. But I can say that, this information, all of this plant level information, is maintained on secure server. It's not shared with external parties, including the association level. It's really just between you and your login, and encrypted in our site. Anything beyond that, I'd be happy to kind of get you in touch with our, our IT statement on that, on the security. but that we do have, let's say, several layers of security on that. So the survey itself, those of you who have participated in the industry EPD in the past, or anybody who's done their own EPD, this will look really familiar. We're looking for kind of a few key points of data. And there is a bit of a level of priority. We are asking a few things that we know are kind of lower priority, but we need to ask them anyway to kind of maintain our data. But I'll go through these. The first one is overall production. So I can enter in an amount of, let's say, 100,000 cubic meters for my facility. Again, this is all annual production data and annual material input. So this is for the calendar year 2020 is how what we've defaulted to, the most recent calendar year. Once I've done that, I enter in my electricity. Now you'll see there's some other options here for electricity. Let's say if you have solar panels or you're purchasing renewable energy, something like that, that you have the option. We imagine most people will just be entering this first line item of grid electricity. We do have, again, different options on units. So let's say natural gas, depending on what units your bills come in, we can enter in an amount in any unit. We can handle that. So I've entered in a little bit of electricity, a little bit of natural gas. We are looking for diesel use in fleet, but only to the degree that it's a transit mixing operation, so we can basically partition out the mixing from the actual delivery. So I'll go ahead and enter in that. Okay, so that's really, these are the most important part is this top part, the energy part. We find in an LCA that 90+% of our impacts are always energy related. Now, we do have additional places down here to put in, let's say, things like if you're using any dust control, or if you've got any, let's say, lubricants, things like that, what we call ancillary materials. But again, those are going to be lower volume, less significant, and if it's not something you track, you're more than welcome to kind of move past that. We're not, the point is we're not trying to get you to derive or calculate a lot that hopefully you're already doing, at least on the energy side, basically pulling from your energy bills. Water use, again, if it's not metered, if you're pulling from a well, something like that, then this is going to be impossible. But if you are pulling off a municipal system, you'd enter in your volume of water. Again, this is over the course of a year, and also to enter in percentage recycled, basically recycle wash water that goes back into the mixes. Waste is another one that's typically poorly measured. We're already asking up at the top for the batch waste on a percentage basis, but if you have other solid waste that's going to landfill, basically taken off site, then we'd like to know that here. And then these last two, air emissions and water emissions, you can see here it says if tracked. So we're not asking you to derive anything here, but if you do happen to have particulate emissions for your plant, it is useful to us to be able to update our models. Not everyone needs to fill out that part of the survey, but if it's available, it's really, really helpful if we can get as much information as we can on water emissions. And if you happen to have any water effluent, then we'd like that too. And once I'm complete, I can save the survey. And now it's in progress. So let's actually go back and submit it. Oh, I can, let's see here. Sorry. So then I'm back down here. Actually, I've reviewed it. And now all I have to do now to basically complete the survey is hit this completed button. But I can say that, as of December 31, We're going to be going through and manually doing all this. But, you know, basically when you're satisfied with the survey, if you hit complete, what that does, it means you can't go back and edit it without it locks the survey. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this one, submit it, and now my only action I can do is actually to view it. The update on the interface has a little note down here that if you do change your mind and you want to go back, it'll have basically a link to send us a note to unlock, or do you want to go back? That's really, you know, the gist of what we're looking for is the supplier information and then the survey itself. The mixes that are going to go into this are coming from the provincial level associations. But this, you know, like I mentioned, this system here, you know, when we get to the end, there's 3 or 4 more tabs here that would unlock, that would allow you to go in and to enter your own mixes and to start producing your own EPDs. But yeah, that's the extent of what I have to cover, and yeah, happy to kick it over to questions. I've been sort of following the chat, which has now disappeared, so I'll leave it to these gentlemen to bring up some questions.
Perfect. Thank you, James. Let's dive right in. So for example, this is a very common question that we've gotten several times, but basically what they're asking is, how do we navigate across the various EPDs from competitors that might use different methodologies and data sets? Is this even possible without an actual standard?
Well, one thing I can say is the concrete, what we call product category rules, that's the rules for completing an EPD. They're quite prescriptive in terms of data. Now, you may have an instance where one company is using, let's say, facility-specific cement data, and the other is using industry data because their supplier, let's say, doesn't have an EPD. We're doing what we can to kind of highlight the EPDs that are, as you know, supply chain specific, and I know others are too. But I can say, you know, the product category rules do a lot to ensure that we're comparing apples to apples when we see different EPDs. Other background data sets are quite harmonized. It's really just the degree to which it's supply chain specific, and that could vary somewhat, but that's just how it goes. And you know, I think that everyone's moving towards the more specific, the better, and giving preference to those.
Okay, thank you. Is this web-based input for the industry average EPD, or is this for individual companies and operations to create EPDs?
It has a dual purpose. You know, we developed it, well, again, to do both, to help us manage projects like this with hundreds of participants. But also, you know, at the end, it's all within the same system. So that means that once the surveys are complete and been validated on our end, that it is, you know, it's an identical survey and it's an identical system, and you've maintained your same user account and just move forward into producing your own EPD. So both.
So once you have the information, then both are going to be available and you can pick and choose later on.
Right.
Okay.
And jump in from an association standpoint, people are free to use whoever they like. We've partnered with, this is the second time that the CRMCA has partnered with Athena. And again, so we're just trying to provide the average and options for members to answer the questions they're getting about what is the carbon content of their actual mixes. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay. What if a plant uses multiple cements? If the EPD is valid for only 5 years, how do you predict supply over the next 5 years?
Well, that's a good question. You know, these EPD, they need a validity date that extends into the future, and basically we're taking a snapshot of the industry. mean, the EPD right now that's currently live is not anymore, it's no longer, I would say, particularly representative. But they do have a shelf life. Definitely preference is given, I think, to more recent EPDs. But yeah, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. So you have a validity period that may extend a little bit too far into the future. But the best we can do is to basically do our best to capture what's happening right now, and then to revisit that, to make the effort to revisit that in the future, and potentially even more soon than 5 years from now. As we systematize this, it makes that a lot more possible. If something were to change or there's enough movement behind this to produce new benchmarks in a couple of years, then yeah, we have the capacity to do that.
Okay, perfect. What about suppliers that use blended cements? How is that addressed in this calculator?
Well, this is an issue more on the mix side. If you're buying, let's say, blended cements, all we're really looking for here is, the degree to which we can reference the existing EPDs for the cement suppliers. But let's say, as we develop these representative mixes, we just need to make sure that the modeling represents what's actually going in. So if it's basically a GU and slag or something like that, GU slag blended cement, we just need to make sure that the mixes represented in the EPD incorporate that, that we're not overshooting. We're not assuming that a blended cement's 100% GU or something and overshooting on the SCM content. So as long as we, get that right on the mixes, then it kind of it's not really, we're incorporating the right amounts of the different ingredients. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that answers that.
To jump in from a CRMCA perspective, that's why we went to regional, because again, when we started averaging across the whole country, it just got crazy, and when it doesn't make sense to us internally, then publicly it's a huge issue. So hopefully this will help clean that up. And then, as James said before, if individual cement companies produce product specific EPDs, then it's a moot point. We're not using an average at that point. Then you can use the real data. But that, again, ties more back into discussion about facility specific EPD and what level of accuracy are you using in your data sets when you're calculating those numbers.
Right. Yeah, and we're producing EPDs on demand using blended cements all the time. It's just a matter of making sure that we get that.
Okay. Just some very basic questions. So this new process, it's pretty much similar to what you guys did in 2015, but now instead of filling out that spreadsheet, you're just using this website to gather the information. Is that right, James?
That's right, and the content is pretty much identical. A lot has changed on the back end on our calculations, but on the facility side, the type of information we need, it's pretty much the same. I get the one main difference is there's so many cement EPDs now that we're asking for a bit more on that specific supplier so we can use that data. Besides that, it's pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm. The next question, you already addressed this, but this is a very important question. So who will be receiving this information? I assume the submitted information from the suppliers, and will this information be public?
No, definitely nothing at a facility level would ever be made public. It would be maintained internally within our team and covered by our own kind of internal confidentiality requirements. But no, definitely nothing public. The only thing we would ever see published would be averages of an entire regional. Yeah, definitely nothing at a facility level.
Yeah, and just to jump in, the CRMCA commitment back to NRC is to produce the regional average information, and that's it. So the only thing that outside people are going to see is those summaries broken out by the concrete regions going forward.
Okay. Next question is, where do we submit the mix specific information related to the 20 to 70 MPa mixes? I guess that pertains to the type 3 EPDs versus what we're trying to do here with the regional average.
Yeah, so let's say if you mean, determining which mixes show up in the provincial level EPDs, then talk to your associations about that. But if you're, let's say, concerned about having an EPD for a specific mix for a job or a bid application, something like that, that's something that we would basically help you with at the end. Once you're in the system, if you're feeling that need, then we can talk to you about that and get you up and producing your own EPDs really quickly. Once we're completed, but that's where that would come in.
Mm-hmm.
I can jump back in since I was around in the 2015 time. So again, each of the regions has their own technical committee. So Alan, not Bart, heads up the Ontario Technical Committee. And again, each region is responsible. Once you've identified your 18 mix designs, it doesn't have to be the same. It can be whatever you want in your region, as Alan said before. You have to create with your own working group and using the non-disclosure agreement. I know the process we're following here in Ontario is the 4 or 5 members that are part of the technical group submit the data to the association. The association creates the averages, and then we just review the averages together to make sure that it's reasonable. And then that's the data that gets submitted to Athena for example, Ontario's 18 mixed designs. But again, it's coming up with an average, and even in going back to 5 years ago, there was a half-day meeting and lots of debate about everyone's using different cements and different aggregates and different admixtures. So there is, even within any given class of strength, some fairly significant variations in mixed designs. But we just have to make sure that what we're putting out is representative, because it is going to be the average that we're going to be held accountable to achieve going forward.
Okay. I like this question. This is how I would do it. So if someone has the data in the GCCA tool, so the Global Concrete and Cement Association tool, based on 1 cubic meter, can they just send that to you, or do they actually have to populate everything using your tool?
We can help with that. I don't want to make too many promises on doing data entry, but I would like to see that. Happy to help wherever we can, and we do have some resources to help out with that. If you've got it in a format, and would be in a particular, another format, and it would be particularly tedious to put it into this format, we can probably help expedite that. Don't tell everyone.
Only other thought that jumps out, again, I know we, as an industry, both the cement and concrete industry, want to move to one standardized tool to try and avoid differences in calculators influencing the results. So that's the only concern that jumped out at me with that comment is, are we putting in more variables here that we don't really want to address? But we'll have to think about that a little more.
Okay. You spoke about this already a little bit, James, but is there a definition list where we can clarify the data you're looking for? So in terms of waste, what do you need to enter? Concrete returning from a job site, is that going to be defined a little better in the survey?
Yeah, definitely. That was some of the feedback we got from some of our beta testers, and I can say that our next build of this that we're pushing this week has a bit more explanation on that. We may end up, I think this is going to be recorded, so hopefully, our explanation helps. We'll probably end up drafting a little bit of a helper that will probably find its way into the tool. We've been kind of pushing to get the core functionality up and going, but yeah, if there's requests for more kind of clarification, let's say even after we've done what we've currently done, then yeah, our intention, we'll definitely hear about it. Our intention is to make this as user friendly and as self-service as we possibly can. That's our goal too. So work with you on that.
Perfect. Next question is there going to be a group that decides what type of plants are used for the industry average EPD? So how are you going to be determining which plants you're going to be using to actually create the industry average EPD?
Sure. Well, we've been getting the directory list. We've currently been receiving those. We're reviewing them right now just to make sure that we get a good cross section. That we're not too heavily skewed towards the large scale, you know, or let's say we have enough representation of different types of facilities. That's you know, we have basically minimum representation that we need to be able to demonstrate. And we, you know, one of our deliverables here is a statistical report to make sure that have an adequate sample. So that we're addressing all of that, but basically with the help from the associations to provide us the kind of the plant directories to pull the participants from.
Okay. We'll take two more. We're almost out of time here. How do we get access to the platform? I can address that. So you can just reach out to your local association representative. They send the information off to Athena, and then Athena gets in touch. Is that right, James?
That's right. Yeah, we have email lists, and that's who will be the contacts. That's what your credentials will basically send you a login and a password.
Okay. And last question, if you decide not to participate in this regional industry average currently, is there any way to get in a couple of years?
Yes, that's in theory, but also, you know, more contingent on if there is an update and when that update happens. Your best bet's to get in now. But yeah, it's not to say that in a year or two, if there's enough folks that didn't get in that want to, that we can't instigate an update. But it is, the goal is to have as good a data now, and the funding is there now. So I think that's still everyone's goal.
Perfect. Again, thank you very much, James and Bart. Any other comments before we wrap this up? No?
Not from our end. I can say that, our plan was to have this start surveying into the month, but I think we're a little ahead of schedule. So you may, we're going to follow up with everyone, our project champions, and we may be able to get you up and going here sooner than that. So be on the lookout.
Outstanding. So again, thank you, Bart. Thank you, James, for your time. And as mentioned, this will be posted on our website probably this afternoon, if not tomorrow morning, so everybody can access the recording. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to your local association representative. So thank you very much again, and have a great day, everyone.